Hello, Stitchers. Welcome to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. I'm your host, Lisa Woolfork. I'm a fourth-generation sewing enthusiast with more than 20 years of sewing experience. I am looking forward to today's conversation, so sit back, relax, and get ready to get your stitch together.
Hey friends, hey, it's Lisa from Black Women Stitch and the Stitch Please podcast. And as I say every week, this is a very special episode because this episode is with none other than 3H. That's right, hand sewing Heather the Hazer. Heather, the hand sewing Hazer, is joining us today from the West Coast. And I, of course, mean Heather Grocock. She is a visual effects artist. She is a lighting artist. Y'all, when you think about what does it mean to bend light to make art, that sounds so intangible. But let me tell you something. Take a picture in the dark. And then you will understand why lighting is an art form and why it is so important. Heather has worked on some amazing productions that you might recognize: The Flash, Supergirl, the Orville, Brea, Orphan Black Echoes. She does things like listen to people's Emmy reels. I'm like, what does that even mean? What? Girl, what? So we are so grateful to have our visual effects artist here today. Thank you so much, Heather Grocock, for being with us. Welcome to the Stitch Please podcast. And thank you for coming to share your sewing story with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Heather is really amazing. And one of the things I'm really excited to talk with her about is what seems like two amazing strands of her creativity and wondering how these work together. She is Heather Grocock. She is the visual effects artist. She works on film and TV. She has a consultancy and she does this stuff. The word rendering, for example, means something to Heather that doesn't mean to me. I'm thinking, I'm going to put some fat in a pan and render that out. Heather's like, I'm going to stare at a computer screen for thousands of hours and wait for this video to be a film. Heather also is Auntie Bunny, with a very lovely handmade crafts business where she sells burp cloths and bibs and pouches and all sorts of things that she ornaments with hand sewing. So I am really looking forward to understanding how and if those two things intersect. So thank you again, Heather, for being here and being willing to talk about so many aspects of your creative life.
Yes, when you put it like that, it does sound like a crazy wall of things called, like, what is the Venn diagram of that? Very specific.
The Venn diagram is Heather the hand sewing Hazer. That's what I think. And I'm calling her the hand sewing Hazer, y'all, because, some people, it's not enough for them to do something. It's not enough for them to do hand sew. Oh, yes. And if you're on the Patreon right now, I'd just like you to know that she is currently attempting to haze me right now by showing me this delightful sashiko stitched kitchen towel that I'm sure she spent 90,000 hours on to create 20 million stitches, incredibly tidy and neat and regular. Right. But, Heather's not satisfied with her doing it. She's got to haze everybody else into her own little, hand sewing world very aggressively. And so we're going to have her talk about that. Heather, how did you get started? What is your sewing story? How did sewing and stitching enter your life?
So my first needle art was embroidery, and my maternal grandmother taught me. She was a sewist, she was a quilter, she also embroidered, and both of my grandmas, my paternal grandma made all of her own clothes, and she was the first lady, and her church suits were immaculate.
Wow.
Everything she wore, she made, and it was just beautiful. So I got my love of sewing from my grandmothers. So from the embroidery, my mom put me in a sewing class. I think I was 11-ish. And I ended up making several cat print dresses out of a very stiff cotton. Okay. It was very starchy cotton. And my mom and I had started making an evening gown, but it was satin and like crepe de chine.
Oh.
And we were beginner sewists. We didn't know anything about a serger, nothing about French seams, no
Wow.
formal dressmaking pattern, like anything like that. So I remember we ended up stopping, I think because my mom was like, okay, what we're not doing is purchasing another sewing machine that only does one thing. And I was like, fair. And I was in school and everything. So, and I was like kind of a hospital kid. So we were like back and forth with the doctor. It didn't fit in the schedule. So it kind of fell out of my life. Then I went on to go to art school at the College for Creative Studies in Detroit.
Nice. Shout out to College for Creative Studies in Detroit. Holla.
Right across the street from the DIA, like free admission for students. At least
Nice.
It used to be. I don't know if it is anymore. It's been a while. So obviously because I'm old. So I was a fine arts major, and I always had a little bit of overlap. Fine art for them was painting, printmaking, sculpture. There was always a little overlap with crafts because I was a printmaker. So that's silk screening, maybe dyeing the fabric. I took like a 1 week survey on shibori dyeing, which I really loved.
Wow.
And I had made silk paintings before, which I entered in scholastics in high school and got a silver key. I was very excited. And the dye is still good. It lasts a really long time. My silk is like balled up in a corner somewhere, so I'll pull that out again eventually. But my biggest, like, I wouldn't call it a regret, but my biggest just like, I wish I had done was that I wish I had taken the actual weaving class, because they had the really big hand looms and they were making some very cool stuff. But I couldn't fit it in my schedule. So, you graduate, you realize that being a fine artist, though I was making giant pastel paintings and selling them for thousands of dollars, thousands of dollars every other month or so is not like enough to sustain yourself. Mm-hmm. So I went into advertising. I was doing a bit of graphic design. I was getting like internships, freelance gigs. And then a colleague called and was like, hey, why don't you come work with me? Like, you're learning 3ds Max, which was a 3D program at the time. My husband at the time was a 3D artist. And he was like, hey, we need to make more money and you have art skills. So why don't you learn a little bit of 3D? And I was just like, whatever. But then he worked on his first gig and I saw how much money he was making. And I was like, holy crap, I'm not going to block my blessing. Let me learn this software. Like, let me learn the skills to be in this industry. So I worked on a Ford commercial, and it was a job that it was basically for the summer of 2012. And what I did not know is that when you are freelancing on commercials, you need to book your next job before your current job ends. Oh. So yeah, I was just kind of like flapping in the wind, and I was like, okay, what else can I do? I know how to do advertising. I am good with Photoshop. Like, I'm in automotive, and it turned out that a friend of mine really needed a retoucher. And he was like, listen, come work with us. It's staff, like retouching. You're not confined by the pipeline, which we'll get into. And it's a lot of fun. We're painting on pretty cars, which I am from the Motor City and born in Detroit proper, okay? Not in the metro of Detroit. I am fully 100%, okay? So I was like, okay. So, and I go work with them. My first day I get there and they're trying to do orientation, but the way all production schedules work is it's always go, 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 go. There's no time for anything. And so my friend comes in, my boss now interrupts them. I don't know what you have going on with these people, but we need you to get your computer set up and we have files for you to work on. And I just looked at the person running the orientation. I looked at him and I was like, it's like, let me go get set up.
It's like, exactly. It's like, wait a minute. It's like, we need you so badly that we don't have time to orient you to the whole company. Just come over here to this cubicle so you can do the job we already have established for you.
Exactly. There will be no orientation for you. Straight to the easel, you painter. Go to the thing now. So, and I had so much fun at that job. I was like, I'm doing the thing that I meant to do. I've done all the steps. Yes, this is great. And then I had rheumatoid arthritis, which had been just kind of chilling, like fine. And then we had a terrible winter. It flared out of control. And to the point where we were just like, we can't live in Michigan anymore. Like thunder snow is not it. I'm very affected by pressure changes, humidity, weather. And the rheumatologist that I did talk to was like, most people with your disease live in warm places. Why do you live here? And I was like, it didn't occur to me to move somewhere else. You think and he was like, yeah, you'll feel a lot better. So, serendipity, because the universe is always conspiring to help us.
That's right.
Another colleague called me and my husband, and he was like, you guys got to come out to LA. You got to come work on this VFX thing. It's so much cooler than cars. And we were a little like offended because like we like cars.
Exactly. So, what could be cooler than cars? What are you talking about?
Yeah. Like I watch F1. I watch Top Gear. Like I like vroom, vroom, go fast, pretty. Like, I don't want to be in the vroom, vroom going fast. I would like to see. So we're like, okay, we might as well take a chance. We obviously can't stay here. But it was nice because I worked for a French company, so it was unlimited sick days. Like, so they were very respectful and very like accommodating with that. And it was just like, I don't know what's wrong. It's autoimmune. And it's been fine up until now. So we gave her because they needed us to come out immediately, like within the month. So we gave her 2 weeks, and it was a shock because I was having so much fun. He was so established, and everyone was like, what do you mean? You're and we were like, we have to. Like, one, for him, he was going straight into the compositing department to work on the Flash. So this was his goal from the beginning. That is what he went to our school for, was animation and digital media, because we're college sweethearts. Right. So yeah, and people are like, oh my gosh, you guys you're married?
You're married
like, no.
to each other? College
to
sweethearts?
each other still?
Fine arts majors?
Years.
Fine arts majors, find love and jobs
right,
and each other? What?
Really? And you have a cat? So we were like, okay, obviously we're going to take this opportunity, number one, for you, because this is your dream. And number two, for me, because I can't be in the winter. And the job that this person had for me was a coordinator position. It was not an artist position, even though I had worked with them before in an artist capacity. But the sexism be sexism in VFX.
Okay.
So that is
of an unfortunate reality.
We'll talk about it on a hot tea episode, because my experience of that first 9 months, like we moved to Glendale, so new city, everything in LA is loud and overwhelming and a whole lot and just a little bit icky. So it was just like a culture shock for me. And I was like, I really do feel like a bumpkin out here. And I knew that when we went to the Christmas party that year, they rented out all of Universal Studios.
The entire campus?
The entire, all of it.
Wow.
So we just had our run of the park, and there was food, there was drinks. Like, this was something that I had not seen, like, since my mom was like heavy, like in politics and going to like national conventions where they just like, I was like, y'all, this is nice.
They rented out the entire, so you're saying the Universal Studios theme park?
Yes.
They rented that
the entire park was our Christmas party, and they were free pouring drinks, honey. It was like that. I was like, is this advertising? The accountants got lit. It was a whole thing. So at that point, I was like, okay, this, like, this could be really cool, because when you're up like high in one of those buildings in a ballroom or something, you're looking over the whole city, it's lit up, and just like you're like, okay, this, now I see what people are talking about when they're talking about their like Hollywood dreams, like we're in the biz, this is
Yes,
showbiz,
yes, here we are.
Yeah. So I orchestrated my entry into the lighting department. We were working really late on, I think it was season finale, first season of Flash. And so I was missing home, and I was like, you know what, you guys have got to have some cars like in this server that I can just like play around and light like with your software. They were 3ds Max House to 3D Studio Max, which we made up a song about, which I may sing later because it comes up. So I found a sick Ferrari 458, and I was like, oh yes. So I'm putting like paint materials, and there were like okay materials on it, but LA does not do cars like Detroit does cars. Like we get the actual like texture samples. We have rooms that light our paint swatches for, it's like a whole thing. So I'm making adjustments and doing my little thing, and one of the CG supervisors walks by, and he's like, wait a minute, you know how to light? And I was like, and he was like, why don't you light here for us? And I was like, why indeed?
Yeah, why don't I?
Yeah, so
good question. Hey friends, hey, I know you're enjoying the audio version of Stitch Please, and thanks so much for listening. But you're missing out on all the great stuff going on behind the scenes. That's why I'm inviting you to join our Black Women Stitch Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can see all the video versions of the podcast. Plus, you get some amazing swatch cards. You know how much I love these swatch cards. Look, see how cool these are? Oh wait, you can't see them because you are not yet on the Patreon. So when you join the Patreon, you'll be able to see this, me showing you these amazing cards. We also have some great perks at the other tiers, like discounts, swag, office hours, and more. Don't be the last sewist in the group now. Head over to patreon.com/blackwomenstitch or click the link in the show notes and become a Patreon supporter today. We truly cannot do this without you. So thank you so much.
He was like, no, we gotta get her lighting. Like, we gotta do this. So I because I was a coordinator, I tell my boss, I'm like, listen, I would like to switch to lighting. And he very much tried to haze me, but I was like, oh, well, if you fail. And I'm like,
yeah,
my good sir.
Exactly. That's an if that you don't have to worry about.
Yeah,
that's not a probable thing. You're not going to scare me into staying. You're not going to scare me into staying in a role I don't want.
Exactly. I had made friends with all the artists already. And there was another producer who I'm friends with her to this day. She basically like shoved me in there to take the lighting test. She was like, oh no, we're making this happen. If that's what you want to do, boo, we're going to do it. And the last thing that she did before she left that company was made sure that I got in to do the lighting test. Everybody saw it, and I got into that department. And from there, I mean, there's always a bit of hazing when you're new, and especially when
that's where you
are a woman of color. Yes, it's very much trauma hazing. It's learned behavior.
Learned behavior. Yeah, you translated that experience of being hazed at work to haze others about hand sewing.
I did. Because
they say hurt people hurt people. They say hurt people hurt people, and that's why
hand sew. It's nourishing for your soul. And I think if people just gave it more of a try. But so I got in, and I had all manner of hurdles that we don't have time in the 20 minutes. But if you want to go on a VFX deep dive of my journey through that industry as a Black woman, we could definitely do an episode like that.
Yes.
Because there's some tea, honey.
I believe it. And you know what? I'm going to pivot you now, because what I'm interested in is, you have that story. You have worked with light. You have tested. You have shown what you can do. You are, working in the industry. And then, hello, Auntie Bunny.
Yes.
How does Auntie Bunny come from visual special effects, working with lighting Ferraris and being in Detroit with light rooms full of special paint swatches, to hand-stitched, lovingly curated, custom pieces. Who is Auntie Bunny and how did she get here?
As a surprise, like like lots of bunnies. So the industry went belly up. Everybody lost their jobs in the writers and actors strikes. And my husband was able to like keep freelancing after a while, but he is a supervisor. So people are really only hiring supervisors right now. So if you were just a senior artist, regular artist, everyone got like a 3-level demotion. So me being a senior artist, I'm right back to being out of the industry. And after a while, maybe a couple months of being unemployed and irritated, I was like, you know what? I'm getting a sewing machine. I don't know where the idea came from. My mom says that it was probably just like a straight download from the grannies, which does happen, because I was like, I can't remember when I said it, but I know I said it. And then all of a sudden I had a sewing machine, and then I was sewing, and then that was it. Like,
that's that the
I joined
ancestors,
the quilt guild.
the ancestors looking out for you. They're like, what?
Yes.
Our granddaughter needs to do something that's going to make her feel good, and something we already know that she's good at. So next thing you know, you're like, wait a minute, how did I get to the sewing machine? And that's how.
And normally my the way I cope with things being crazy is usually through illustration. But at the time, I couldn't. Like, I would look at my iPad and I'd be like,
yeah.
But I needed some sort of something. And I was like, you know what? I do like fiber arts. And I did miss out on that weaving class. Let me get a sewing machine and start like quilting, making some things. I think I saw a TikTok of someone making a quilt block, and I was like, that looks like fun. I know how to sew. I could do that, because my toxic trait is like seeing people do stuff and then just deciding that I can also do it since I saw it. It mostly works. It works with art things.
Okay.
It does not work with sound engineering.
Oh, okay. All right. Noted.
It does not. That's not my ministry. So I started learning about quilting, its history, the blocks, the methods, and the farther I went down the rabbit hole, so to speak, the more I like just wanted more information, because once I'm like learning about something, I need to know all of the things. Like, even though like it's probably impossible to know all, I want to strive to know all the things so that I can combine all my knowledge and use it. So
yes,
with the goal ultimately of just living out my little fiber artist dream, since like if VFX will not have me, I know a whole guild of quilt grands that will.
Yes.
So after I made my first quilt, and I felt like I was at a place where I could join a group. I joined the Coachella Valley Quilt Guild, and I've been going to the meetings and sewing with the Lunch Bunch, which is it's a group of grands that are in the guild, but they sew at the senior center on Tuesdays. And that's where like the philanthropy pickup is. And we like show all our projects and what we're working on. We get help pinning our quilts, because I don't know about you, but laying a quilt out on the ground and trying to pin.
No, thank you.
I
don't want to do that.
Knees.
No, I don't do that.
Like, even this Megan Thee Stallion would not do that. And
No.
She has the Megan knees.
She sure does. She sure does.
So from there, I was like, what other fiber arts? And then I remembered there was a speaker at the guild meeting one Saturday, and she was an embroidery artist. And she took us on a tour of embroidery around the world. And it unlocked a memory in my brain. And I was like, oh, that's right. So I bought a couple of her embroidery kits, and she explains the stitches and everything. Don't ask me why they're still just sitting undone in my project pile.
They're waiting for you. They're waiting for you to find the right time. They're not
I got
going.
them because they were pretty. And
they're maturing. They're still there. What's the rush? Are they gonna expire? They will not. They're not gonna go bad.
Exactly.
They're
the
there.
Grams say that your fabric has to age like fine wine, and then you pull it out.
There you go. That's
It has to
can you talk a little bit about your entrance into the senior center? I remember you saying something about there was some, because of your age, that you might not have been permitted to participate in senior center programming because they were like, you are not a senior. Tell us about that, about how the Grands kicked down the barriers of ageism so that you could be included.
They did. Okay. So I had just been going to the lunch bunch to drop off my philanthropy stuff, bird cloths, pillows, receiving book, things like that. But I noticed that every time I went, they would just kind of like accost me, like Grands do, like into the group, because I didn't realize I had been going during their show and tell time around like 10:30. So they just like bring me into the circle. Oh, do you have things to show, honey? I was like, I'm just dropping them off. It's just whatever. They're like, oh, thank you so much for making those. And I was like, well, I wanted to help it. What? So one time I go, they're like, so are you going to join the lunch bunch? Are you going to come sew with us? And I was like, well, I sure would like to, but don't you have to be a granny? And they were like, no, you don't have to be a gran. What? Psh, no.
It's called the Senior Center, but we aren't that serious.
So they just did a rebrand. And that's why people are confused. We'll get to it. So I'm like, okay. They're like, no, you just pay your dollar and you join the center. Okay, the community center, not senior community. You join the Joslyn Center. Mm-hmm. And, it's fine. And I'm like, okay. So the next time that I come, I'm like, oh, shoot, that's right. I got to do my thing. So I misunderstood. I thought that I paid them the dollar plus the thing for the membership. They're like, why are you giving us so much money? It's just $1. And I was like, but don't I have to pay? And they're like, no. You have to go to the desk. And I was like, okay. I go to the desk. The desk. I'm like, hi, I've been sewing with the quilt Grands at the lunch bunch down, because it's down the hall and this is the desk. And they told me to come fill out the membership so I can like pay the dues. And the lady is looking at me and she's like, and I was like, can I get forms?
Like, what's wrong? Why are you giving me the side eye? The Grands sent me down here to sign up.
They told me to come. They sent me here. And so she slides me the form. She's like, make sure you fill out both sides. And I was like, why is she saying it like that? I know how to fill out a form. Both sides. Of course I'm going to.
So what does this form look like?
So it just looks like a standard intake form, like your name, address, like basic stuff, like what kind of membership you want, for how long, I flip over the form. It says certification of qualification for B613 8675309. And I'm like, yes, I did. I did absolutely make 2 references in one. And I'm like, oh no. So the qualifications are, the first one, I certify that I am 62 years of age. The second is I'm disabled, I'm a veteran, Now, I am a disabled individual, but I'm not 62. So at this point I pause. I'm like, oh no. Am I about to do a crime? So
about to do a crime. I'm about to commit paper perjury.
Am I about to perjury? So, because my parents are the police, okay? They are both retired Detroit police.
Oh my gosh.
So
it's like lying. This feels wrong to certify lies.
Alert. So I go back to the desk and I'm like, so question. And she's like, And I'm like, oh, you already know. I am a disabled individual, but I'm not 62. Is that a requirement for the thing? And she was like, realization swept across her face. I see. Yeah, you have to be 62. So, no. She took the form back.
See you in a couple of decades. Get out.
And I tried to pull the sympathy card. I was like, oh, well, it's been so nice to sew with the Grands, and I don't have any living grandmas. Fast forward, I find out neither does she. Neither does she. She was like, that's nice. You need to leave because all of this youthful exuberance is dangerous for the seniors.
Oh, good gosh.
Like,
so did the grands revolt? Did they revolt to say, wait a minute?
Okay. So I was incensed. And my mom didn't pick up the phone. So I went to the quilt shop around the corner. And I was like, to the lady that works there, her name was like, I was like, Lori, did you know that you have to be 62 to join the Joslyn Center to therefore sew in the lunch bunch? And she was like, what? No, you don't. And I was like, yeah, you
Yes,
do.
you
And
do.
I told her the whole story. And she was like, first she laughed. And then she was like, oh no. And I was like, yeah. So she was just like, there's got to be like something that we can do. I see my nose running. I'm so sorry. I'm going to just seasonal allergies. So then I'm still mad. So I call my mom and I'm like, Mom, did you know that you have to be 62, da, da, da? And the first thing out of my mother's mouth is, well, now impersonating a senior is a federal offense. You're not doing that, are you? And I was
good
like,
Lord. Great. So now here you were already rejected. And now she's like, now let me just confirm that you're not doing crime. And it turns out that you kind of are doing crime. I mean, you've been sewing
but I wasn't.
with the lunch bunch.
They do not think that I'm 62. I confirmed this at the next Quilt Guild meeting when I was like, oh, I can't wait to tell you what happened. So the first grant I talked to, did you know you have to be 62 to join the senior center? They told me I can't sew with the lunch bunch anymore. She goes, just use your mom's name.
Oh, great. So you want me to do crime? Okay, I got it.
You want me to do crimes?
Yeah, okay. So now let's see if we have any other less felonious grandmas around here. Are there anyone else that does not want me to catch a case? How about that?
No, because the next one said to come anyway. To sneak into the back door and
sew with the grands this way. How did this get resolved? You have got to, because we are near the end of our time, and I must know, how did this end up? How did Heather, the hand sewing Hazer, break her way into the Coachella Valley Community Center without doing felonies?
So the third grant I talked to goes, what? You don't have to do any crimes. We are all allowed to bring a guest weekly. You can come as a permanent guest and representative of the charity, which you are because you do the philanthropy sewing. Don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. So the first week that I went back, one of them came to like get me. And I was like, okay, cool. And I see like a group of them leave for the front desk. And I'm like, oh, snap, it's going down. And they come back and they're like, you don't have to worry about a thing. None of us has to come get you. So what I think they did was march down to the desk and they looked that lady in the eye and they were like, you let that baby sew with us. Like, you let her sew with us. She's a delight. Because we do have some Southern mamas, and I love them so much.
And so they came, they rode out for you in force. They came out for you in force and stood
lady
there.
Gang rolled
Exactly.
up.
Here we are. This is our Heather, and she's going to continue to hand sew and grow and develop. Now, listen, we are getting near the end of our time, and this means we're going to have to come back and have another conversation.
Yes.
But you have got to tell us how, as Auntie Bunny, as Heather Grocock, as someone who does both fine arts and what we envision, I guess, as craft, because of the way that you really do work with such specialized materials, the way that you prioritize craft, and the way that you think so diligently about every single stitch. And it's very clear that you put some love and joy and your own unique light into your stitches. What advice would you have for us? So, the slogan of the Stitch Please podcast is that we will help you get your stitch together. Heather Grocock, Auntie Bunny, the 3H, hand sewing Hazer. How would you advise us to help us get our stitch together?
Make friends with quilt grands and sewing grands in your community. They are a wealth of information. They are always happy to share. Since I have been sewing with these ladies, I have leveled up exponentially, way more than I would. And I am a good studier, but nothing is better than firsthand information from primary sources. They know about vintage fabrics. They know about the history of all of it. They come from different parts of the world, so with different traditions. And I learned about Sashiko from a quilt grand who gave me a quilting technique book, and Sashiko was like one page in it. And I was like, okay, this is not enough information. And I went down the rabbit hole from there. So had I not joined this group of ladies, I might have never heard about it. And I was just like, quilt grands, man, like, don't discount your elders, because they may be a little annoying sometimes, but most of the time, if you filter through that, you learn something every time you talk to them.
Wow, that is just beautiful. And Heather, we are so grateful that you were able to sit and talk with us today. I am just so delighted. As I said, we ran out of time. We will have to do it again another time when we have more time.
My brain hamsters went.
This was lovely. This was truly lovely. Tell us where we can find you on the socials. Tell us where we can find you. We know that you're on TikTok and for your regular programming. Where can we find you?
Yes, you can find me on the TikTok at That's Sew Heather, SEW, like sewing. There is a link tree in my bio, which will take you to all my socials. If you are looking for me in my visual effects capacity or fine art capacity, that will be my website, which is just myname.com, heathergrocock.com. I take over the first page of Google if you simply Google my name. So
you sure do.
You don't have to remember. It will be me.
It is absolutely her. I checked.
Yes. And then if you are looking for handmade gifts with an eco-conscious lean, it will be auntiebunny.gumroad.com, and that's Auntie spelled Auntie.
And we're going to include those links in the show notes so that people can find you right after this episode.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Heather. We are so grateful.
I'm so glad to be here. I'm excited to do this again.
Yes.
You've been listening to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. We appreciate you joining us this week and every week for stories that center Black women, girls, and femmes in sewing. We invite you to join the Black Women Stitch Patreon community with giving levels beginning at $5 a month. Your contributions help us bring the Stitch Please podcast to you every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support, and come back next week and we'll help you get your stitch together.